Hi, my name is Mark Chansky. I'm the coordinator of the Reformed Baptist Network, and this is a additional episode of NetTalk, where NetTalk is a podcast where we discuss themes that are related to the Reformed Baptist Network and our purpose, which is glorifying God through fellowship and cooperation and taking the Great Commission to the ends of the earth. And it's a privilege for me to be able to have here today 3 Air Force military chaplains. Part of the RBNet is for us to gather together mighty men so they can serve on the kingdom wall. And we really believe that sending men off to Colombia or to Zambia or to India is crucial in getting the message of the gospel to the ends of the earth. But you guys as military chaplains, you can get places where pastors can't go, and even where rank and file churchmen can't go. We could say you guys are the special ops in the kingdom. You can get into the military where, even I think of this week, there was that strike from Iran into Israel, and there were the rockets, red glare, and the bombs were bursting in air, and you had some of your men involved with that, right?
Yes.
So guys who were really on the cutting edge, and there were life and death circumstances being faced, and then you talk with them and you communicate with them. Didn't you say that there was a guy who texted you and said, all is well, something like that?
Yeah. So after the events of a couple nights ago, just sent a message in the morning, hey, checking in, how you doing? And his response was, all is well here, had great ministry last night.
Because he was a chaplain as well. So we got these chaplain here. Like, I haven't introduced you guys yet. Please, I apologize for that. We've got Josh Stoley. Josh is a lieutenant colonel. He's stationed here at Hurlburt Field in the Destin, Fort Walton, Florida area.
Yes.
Okay. And you introduce your friends. They're my friends too, but you know more information even about them than I do.
This is Chaplain Steve Richardson, also stationed here at Hurlburt Field. We've been together for a couple of years now. He's been on both my team for the 1st Special Operations Wing, but is now over with the 492nd Special Operations Wing, embedded with their members there. And then Chaplain Jonathan Black, he and I go back a number of years. We were stationed together at Little Rock Air Force Base, and now he's in the Florida National Guard, lives here in the local area, and actually going to be helping my team out by name request. As the Lord ordained, he lives here locally, and I had some manpower days that I needed filled and reached out to him directly. I wanted him on my team for the next month.
And I consider Josh to be kind of the godfather of our military chaplains.
You know, James Gallion his call sign is Godfather, so I can't.
Is that right?
It is, so I can't take that from him.
I've got to change the name. Maybe we'll make you to be the Captain America of our chaplains. So Josh has been a real helpful source of leadership to our chaplains. We at the Reformed Baptist Network, we really want to get a whole stable full of military chaplains because the strategic opportunities that you men have. We have a good number of chaplains now. In fact, Jonathan already is a chaplain with us. Josh is a chaplain with us. And Stephen has applied to be. You've been interviewed, right, Stephen?
Correct. Sir.
And he's going through the process, and God willing, in a few weeks, he will be an official chaplain. Now, the occasion for my being here is simply that I'm down here in the Panhandle, and we arranged that I would come and minister at the chapel here. And boy, if we could turn the camera around, this is a magnificent edifice that the Lord has given for you. And even being here, you had a large, robust attendance at this chapel. Very encouraging to see what the Lord is doing. Kind of a revival of sorts on this base.
Definitely some revitalization. Coming out of COVID was slow for this program, and Steve knows, he's been here longer than I have. COVID had an impact on lots of churches everywhere and lots of military chapels. And this program was very slow to come back from doing everything virtual to in person. But that's been our prayerful focus for a couple of years. And we've seen wonderful growth, not just in numbers, but in the wisdom and maturity We've had people born again. We've had people baptized, right here, including two of my children. And it's been wonderful to see all that happening.
Yeah, and to see it, just to be on hand and to comprehend the kind of reach that you have into the lives of these military soldiers, both on the base and then, you were off in Germany for quite a while, weren't you, Jonathan? Tell me the kind of opportunities you had there to impact.
Well, to go back one more assignment was the one in Turkey. That I think was very fruitful. So that's an unaccompanied assignment, so I couldn't take my family with me, unfortunately. But it did give me 100% opportunity. Not being with family, I could devote myself completely, being there by myself. So there was a tremendous opportunity to do a lot of chapel-based ministry, both preaching and teaching, discipleship, a lot of counseling. People come by themselves. They leave their spouses, their families, their loved ones behind, and they're there for 12 months, locked into a base they really can't leave. And so that provides a lot of opportunity to see people's hearts and lives. And the pressures reveal what's going on inside people's lives. So that just provided an opportunity for ministry, for sure. And while I was there were three particular young men that I was able to disciple closely enough to where two of them are now in seminary, called to ministry. One of them attends one of the RBNet churches in California, San Diego. And another one is actually stationed at Eglin right now. And he's interested in the chaplaincy himself as he finishes his MDiv.
And that touches on a theme, Jonathan, that I wanted to really touch on here. And that has to do with young men who have interest in the ministry. Maybe they're in the middle of their seminary training and they wonder what kind of a field they might labor on. Maybe be a church planter, or maybe take on an existing church, or be a missionary off in Africa or in India, but ponder the possibility of being a missionary to the military and the spiritual opportunities that are here. I mean, Stephen, how long have you been a chaplain yourself?
I've been in for 6 years.
Okay. So if you were talking to a seminarian who was wondering where the Lord would have him labor, give me some input regarding maybe the wisdom of considering the field of the military chaplaincy.
Yeah, I mean, there is rich ministry to be done in the military. The military itself is it can be a dark environment. We wield our nation's hammer when it comes to defense of our nation. And so we are asked to do jobs that the majority of the population has no clue about. They don't understand it. They can't grasp it, but they want us to do it. So for myself as a young man in ministry, for me, it was the opportunity to be the light, show the light of Christ, and share the light of the gospel in such a dark environment where there's a lot of programs that exist that supposedly help, but they're not sharing the light of the gospel. And so myself as a young minister, for me, it was seeing the need, knowing that I had the capabilities, both physically and through calling, to go and minister in that capacity.
Can you give, Stephen, you're in the military, can you give an account of maybe a narration, a vignette of one individual where you said, oh, I was able to help this person? Choose one for me just to express on a personal level what kind of outcome might result from the opportunity of being a military chaplain.
Sure. So I was actually preparing to deploy with a team. We were going to go overseas, and we had started about a year beforehand to gather and get together. And there was a young captain in his 20s who came to me one day, and just my first impressions of him were that he was an unbeliever and that he very much cared about his persona, and he kind of struck me as, frankly, egotistical. But one day at an exercise, he said, "Chaps, I'm going to blow your mind." And he pulled out
Chaps, he calls you. Huh?
Chaps, yeah. He pulled out a New Testament from his pants and said, "I carry this around with me everywhere I go." said, "That's great, brother, but do you read that New Testament?
Uh.
Do you know what's in it?"
So it was like a rabbit's foot for him, huh?
It was. Lo and behold, through God's sovereignty, a few months later, as we're going through this process to prepare, he walked into the doors of this very chapel. And I happened to come out of my office and I saw him and I said, "What are you doing here, man?" He said, "Actually, I was hoping I could meet with you." And I said, "All right, let's go to my office." We went to my office and he said, "I know the Lord, but I don't live for the Lord. And I want you to mentor me in the Word, and I want to study the Bible with you because you are what I think of as a godly man, and I want to be like that." So, praise God, brother. We ended up deploying together, spent a deployment together. Fast forward a few months, I mentored him for a couple more years after that. I just did his wedding. Just performed his wedding last month. Beautiful, gospel-rich ceremony where I got to preside over that, and him and his beautiful bride joined together, and he's serving the Lord, and he's loving life and pleasing God with his life.
See, Stephen, that just makes my heart sing. I think you've heard me say Psalm 107 speaks of those sailors who were on the high seas amid storm, and they went up and down with the waves, and God brought them to their wits' end. And isn't that true? You find people in the military, because of all the stress and strains of military life, a lot of people end up at their wits' end. And to be able to have a man of God, not just a chaplain who's an atheist, because there are that kind of chaplain here, right? And who are maybe transgenderists, but that a chaplain who's, for us, we would say a biblical Christian, even a Reformed Baptist. Josh, give me something. Give me a vignette yourself. Somebody you've been able to impact as well.
Sure. I mean, I'll share one from my first assignment. I was assigned to preach regularly in the chapel setting, to be the pastor of our chapel community, and just some simple things we were working on, upgrading the audio visual stuff at the chapel. We added hearing assisted devices for hearing impaired. One of our spouses, a wife of one of our members, was deaf. And we got that system installed. She was able to wear it and hear the preaching. I was preaching on the divinity of Christ, and over a series of weeks, if not months. And she came up to me in tears one Sunday, and she said, "You know, you've been talking about the divinity of Christ, that Jesus is God, and I was mad at you because that wasn't true. He's not God; he's the Son of God." That she said that's what I've taught my whole life, but now that I could hear the preaching, now I know that Christ is God. And that was phenomenal to me, that something I hadn't thought of. I was just meeting a requirement for accommodating people with disabilities. And a woman who had been in the church and sat under preaching her whole life happened to be by the Lord's providence sitting in the chapel, heard the gospel and heard the nature of Christ. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, chaplains as well, that have pastoral hearts and are willing to labor in preaching and teaching and counseling and work center, kind of the whole spectrum of everything we do.
And for me, Josh, being here today and seeing you lead the worship, man, a lot of guys who are in seminary or outside in the military, they think you have to become so politically correct that you basically have to neuter your theology to qualify to be in the military. This was basically a Reformed Baptist 1689 worship service that took place here. I sat there with my wife. I'm elbowing my wife. I said, "Look what Josh is doing in the military." You were saying politically incorrect things here. I mean, he starts the worship with reading the entirety of Psalm 104, and then he goes on and gives the prayer and the expression of Orthodox ecclesiology. Was, to me, it made my heart sing. And I thought, really, you do have a lot of liberties. And isn't it true that part of the benefit of being even with the Reformed Baptist Network and our Endorser associated gospel churches kind of gives you a protection of sorts, so that if somebody steps up at the worship service and says, "You offended me, Colonel Stowey," and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be court-martialed, because tell me how a good endorser like RBNet can help you.
Right. There's a pervasive rumor that as chaplains that we can't preach the gospel, teach the gospel, preach scripture unapologetically. We can. I would tell any pastor we need to be wise and we need to be precise with our words and preaching the whole counsel of the Word of God. But part of what's ingrained in the separation of church and state, what makes the chaplaincy legal, is that we are credentialed and sent here as missionaries from our sending churches, from our endorsers, and we're required to do the things that our endorser requires. And we're prohibited from doing things that our endorsers prohibit. And with that, I can't do weddings that I wouldn't do in any local church. I can't counsel in a way that I wouldn't counsel in a local church. I can't preach in a way I wouldn't preach in a local church. And that's the protection. If ever anyone accuses me of cherry picking topics or issues, I can say, here's our confession. This is what we believe.
The 1689. Yeah.
And even the way that we have purposed to co-labor together here, we preach through whole books of the Bible. And therefore nobody can accuse us.
Consecutive exposition.
Exactly. Nobody can say you're picking this topic or that topic. No, this is just where we're at in Romans chapter 9. And we have the freedom to preach according to our convictions. I would say that there is cultural pressure here and in any church to be washed out, watered down, to compromise, to tickle ears.
But that's not only in the military, is it?
That's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, well said.
And that's also important for us to hold each other accountable. So we kind of have a joke after every Sunday. Did I preach any heresy today? But to hold each other accountable. What is it that we're saying? What are we teaching? What are we preaching?
So a minister of the word can be faithful and loyal to the scriptures while being minister in the military.
I would say must be. Because the Lord warns us that we'll be held accountable. And we don't get a pass because we're military chaplains. We are to be stewards of that which was entrusted to us.
I was told by someone involved in our circles that on a ship, there was a military chaplain who was seeking to be faithful and even to hold a spouse accountable to be faithful in the marriage. And even though it caused that spouse to go into a depression because of the sense of guilt that was on him, and even the commander on the ship reproved the chaplain for putting the guilt trip on the sailor. The Endorser, which would be RBNet and Associated Gospel Churches, had the back of the chaplain, even when the commander came at him and said, you have no business undermining the integrity of this man's ministry. And you had even the legal and attorneys who will stand behind it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, our endorsers are our protection. And that's exactly right. If ever anyone accuses that we're doing something inappropriate or discriminatory, provided that we're acting in upright ways according to Scripture, we're protected.
But Jonathan, what if somebody is part of an organization where the endorser has basically gone secular and gone woke and won't uphold the confessional or biblical pattern? Does that person find themselves in an endangered state because there's no one to back them?
Yes, they can find themselves in an endangered state if they don't have that backing, and therefore you have the right and the privilege of being able to switch to a different endorser who will cover you, will protect you, which I've had that experience myself.
And you did. You came from another
did.
organization.
I did.
You came to RBNet, Associated Gospel Churches.
That's exactly right. Yes. The endorser I had before, it's as the old saying would go, it's not, I didn't move, they did. And so as they moved in a different direction, through a couple of years of prayer and reaching out to communicate and watching closely how things were moving, I came to the point in my own conscience where I said, it's a two-way street. We represent the endorser, but the endorser also represents us in a way, right? So I came to the point where I said, you may still enjoy, me representing you, but I can no longer represents you.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I had to move over, and I'm very grateful I did.
So anybody listening to this and you say, man, my endorser may not have my back, just ponder the possibility of maybe RBNet might be useful for you. But let me go further into this. What about young people? I've heard that the military has had difficulty meeting recruiting quotas. And one of the issues has to do with health demands put on recruits, or another one being, wow, this is the maybe one administration presidentially different from another administration presidentially. And I don't know if I want to be a part of that organization during these 4 years or these 8 years. Respond, Stephen, on that issue for a young person who says, man, I don't want to give the keys of my life to this administration. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I would say, right, we ultimately work for the commander-in-chief, so that's the president of the United States. He and the Congress get to decide our orders, so to speak. And we, in our position, right, we don't denigrate the commander-in-chief, but ultimately, who is my real commander-in-chief, right? I trust in the sovereignty of God that regardless of who is president over my nation or commander-in-chief of the United States military, that God has me in this position and will keep me in this position and knows what I need to stay in this position as long as he has deemed fit for me to be there. So, you know, regardless of who it is, I would say as a young person, don't base your decision on who's president right now. Base your decision on, has God called you to be a pastor that wears the uniform and to minister in this capacity?
Who's king right now?
All right.
Yeah, I think of Daniel in Babylon. That's a bad administration to be a part of. But the Lord used him. Lord, Esther, Lord raised such up for a time such as this. And you may not want to go to Zimbabwe or maybe South Africa. Man, it's a dangerous place now in South Africa, but there is a need, and we're to go to the ends of the earth, not just to those places which are convenient, but those places may be treacherous. What about issues of like, let's say vaccinations? I know that's a big issue. Josh, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's
Because being in the military, there are certain requirements.
correct.
Like you even got a short haircut, brother.
I do, as short as it'll go. Yeah, the military, we're called to wear a uniform and to all kind of look the same and dress the same and walk the same and talk the same. There are medical requirements to be vaccinated for all kinds of different things. But what was most convincing to me, especially coming through the difficulty of everything that COVID was to listen to different pastors talk about their missionary work. And our missionary work might call us all around the world, and different nations have different entry requirements.
Vaccinations even.
Exactly. And one prominent pastor said, if I'm required to take this vaccine to go do that speaking engagement, teaching, preaching, I'm going to do that for the cause of the gospel. And that was convincing enough to me that those requirements are just requirements, and they open the door to do this kind of ministry.
And that doesn't mean that you endorse the military to be draconian in the way they treat their airmen, but still you're saying there is a degree of sacrifice that we may need to encounter.
There is a degree of sacrifice on where we live and our haircuts and those kind of things. And I would say
beards, I've even heard that's an issue. Some reformed guys who need to have a big beard.
Yeah. But the military does value religious freedom. It's the very reason we're here and we serve. And if somebody has a particular religious requirement that seems incompatible with military service, you can ask for an exemption from that. So we do exemptions. Steve's done 150 something exemption packages for vaccinations and dress and appearance and beards, and that's part of our constitutional right. It doesn't mean the military will always approve those, because if there's an inherent mission need where a certain exemption might get in the way, the military's first obligation is to complete that mission. But barring that, we grant those exemptions all the time for medical treatments, vaccinations, dress, appearance, work, rest. If we have a conservative Reformed Baptist member who says, I need to be able to attend worship on the Lord's Day, and if their duty calls them to work on Sundays, we work with their commanders to get an exemption to allow them to come to worship.
Yeah.
So it's even things as basic as that.
Jonathan, LGBTQ plus are issues that you men have to deal with, because this is an administration in particular and an organization, the military overall, that has that freedom that it gives to others. And sometimes even there is the compulsion for members of the military to uphold the standards of DEI and LGBTQ plus. Talk to me about that. The pressures that I know you guys got to be shrewd as serpents, innocent as doves. You are not in Midwest independent church situations. You are part of the military, and you are under Caesar's household in a profound sense. But talk to me about the pressure and the kind of strategic maneuvers you have to engage in.
Well, you're right in the way you described it. The pressures that we see in culture are certainly in the military as well, and sometimes, as you said, being in Caesar's household, the pressures can be even more direct, and the expectations can be higher. Again, we would fall back to something we discussed earlier. We would fall back to the fact that I don't have to affirm anything that is contrary to my doctrinal beliefs. And my doctrinal beliefs are those of my endorser. And my endorser is approved by the federal government as a legitimate endorser. So that locks in the idea that legally and morally, I am above board in my beliefs. Now, when it comes to this idea of the serpent and the dove, we don't go out to grandstand. We don't go out to make trouble. We don't try to find issues where there aren't any. And so we do our work quietly. Right? We do our work with thought ahead of time. We look to it says in the Proverbs, when a wise man sees danger ahead, he turns and goes a different way.
But the fool continues down the
Yes, the fool continues to run right into it. And so in this regard, that's what we will do. We will say, what ways can we move around this without causing any unnecessary trouble, yet maintain our doctrinal integrity and serve and present hope and give opportunity for people to know another way of living, another way of believing.
You guys are Daniels and Babylon. You were nodding a little bit there, Steve. Any input you would add to that delicate dynamic there?
Yeah. I've had folks come to me and ask me, I'm struggling with the same-sex attraction, chaplain. What does the Bible say about that? Or maybe they've grown up in the church and they know what the Bible says, but they're looking for me to confirm what society says.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity to open the scriptures and say, thus says the Lord regarding your same-sex attraction. And there is victory to be found in your relationship with Christ over that temptation.
Just to hear you saying this and realizing that the strategic location, you're actually being paid by our tax dollars to be a man of God, speaking the truth of the word, like apples of gold and settings of silver, is a word spoken in right circumstances.
And Mark, if I may add to what we've been saying here, it's kind of Army language, which I started with when I came into the military, is the 2 P's: perform or provide.
Yeah.
So a chaplain, if he can't perform what is being required religiously, meaning actually do it, that would be teach it, preach it, counsel it, give direction in that. If we can't perform that due to convictional differences, then we are, rightfully so, bound to provide for that airman or that soldier in a different way. So, for example, in one of my overseas assignments, we had a lesbian couple come in and wanted marital counseling. And so the wing chaplain went down to all the chaplains, office by office. Can you do this? No. Can you do this? No. Can you do this? No. And so at that time, there happened to be no chaplains whose endorsement and convictions would allow that kind of counseling. So this couple became quite vocal and
Mhm.
enraged and made contact all the way up to the commander of the base.
Mm.
And, which again is pressure, a lot of pressure. But so what we did is we reached out to another chaplain at a different location who could take care of that request.
Mhm.
So in this sense, our hands were clean. But at the same time, their needs were met constitutionally, legally, So this is another way that we also
Yeah.
take
Yeah,
care of
I
things.
think of the proverb that says, the doing of wisdom is like sport to the man of God. That's true. Here you are in the military. Just think of, this is like a chess game. And I need to be wise, and I need to employ truth, but also with that element of discernment to the glory of God. And again, I think, it's special ops, it's spiritual special ops, what you guys are doing. What about issue of, we heard the telephone call here, the ringing, and we got an earlier telephone call, and you had to call a guy off because another guy who was just with us for the service, you said there's a death, somebody needs some grief counseling. And who knows, it was just now the Pentagon calling, and when we get done with this, you guys got to go get the call. But how about suicidal ideation? What's the dynamic here? That's pretty significant in the 2024s, isn't it?
So, Little Rock is the beginning there, right?
Yeah, when Jonathan and I were together at Little Rock, we had, we'll say over a dozen completed suicides in about a year.
A dozen in a year, one Air Force base.
Yes.
Wow.
And we know that suicide rates and ideation rates are rising in our country. The military is not exempt from that. The way that we minister in that is we regularly have folks come in because they know they can come to us and they have confidentiality, they have privilege. We're not going to report them. We're not going to have them put in handcuffs, taken to the hospital, or anything like that. They come to us for genuine help. And we see lives saved. The Air Force is rather protective of the exact numbers, but I'll say over 100 interventions in 2023 just on this team here. And that's a good news story. That's 100 people saying, I'm having a hard time. I'm in a dark place. I need help. And I love that. I love that our airmen are comfortable enough to walk in our doors, to call us anytime, day or night. I love that we have chaplains who are competent to counsel them in the midst of that crisis, ultimately to give them the hope of Christ. And we do see lives saved. And that's not, I would offer that's not going to be unique to the military. The mental health crisis happens across our country. And every pastor and elder should be equipped or be getting equipped to handle those same things.
Didn't you have an issue just recently with some Ospreys? Those flapping helicopter airplanes went down in the Pacific, and then you guys had some real grief issues because some airmen lost comrades and sorrow in the heart. Stephen.
Yeah, so I, through God's grace, had the privilege of actually being there as they brought those gentlemen up out of the ocean.
So you were on site.
I was on site. Yeah, sent in a moment's notice to go and respond.
That's striking while the iron's hot, man.
Yeah, and what other ministry contexts do you get told, I need you in Japan in 24 hours, right? And you go, and you're there as they bring what the term we use in the military are our heroes. We bring our heroes up. And to ensure that they are treated with dignity and respect every step of the process. And then to also spend the following week after we recovered several of them with their spouses and their children. And for one of the spouses to say to me, my husband was a believer. He would have loved to know that you were right there with him. That you were there with him.
What a relevant field of labor. What about even, you think of these proxy wars that are taking place? This has added a new dimension to your labors as well. You got Hamas, you got Hezbollah, you've got the PLO, you've got Iran, you've got Saudi Arabia. I mean, there's a lot going on, and even a lot of these wars are taking place from a distance, not necessarily being on the battlefront, but maybe they're in the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea, and maybe even back in the Pentagon doing things. I mean, talk to me about how this really proliferates fields of labor for you.
I would say that the military in general, the Air Force in particular, is changing a lot of things on the way that we do deployments. We're currently deployed all over the world, the Middle East, South America, the Pacific. That's how it impacts us. Whatever's going on in the world, how those things change and shift, we go where the mission is. And if we're sending hardware and people to a specific location, we go with them as chaplains. We do ministry in those locations. Steve's been deployed a couple times. I've been deployed a few times. Jonathan's done remote assignments. And we go where the people are, we go where the mission is. Sometimes that's in difficult and contested environments. I was in Iraq back in the early 2000s when we still had rocket attacks and indirect fire and combat deaths. And we could very well be called on to do those things again.
Yeah, I think of your ministry as being strategic and influential. And any last word you might have for us, Jonathan? Any input you would give, something we didn't touch on before we would sign off here?
Well, it is indeed a privilege. As you said, it is a privilege to be able to go into places and see people who will never cast a shadow through a church door traditionally out in the civilian world. So in this sense, we have a kind of a captive audience in this regard, and it's a real privilege. As a chaplain, there's a kind of a uniqueness to our position because although we have a rank, we don't really operate by our rank. So what that does, that means that we can go to into a workspace that has new recruits that are just starting off. They can be 18 and have one stripe on their sleeve, or we can go all the way up into the commander's office with someone who has 30 years of experience and might be putting on a star or two, or maybe even wearing one. And so we have this range. We can go anywhere and everywhere. And thankfully, we do carry a certain amount of respect for the work we do. And generally speaking, we have very open doors. And it just provides a tremendous opportunity to reach and touch people at all kinds of levels. And that is awesome because other specialties, other ranks don't quite have that flexibility we have.
Reminds me of the Apostle Paul, who had access not only to the Philippian jailer in a dungeon cell, but also to Caesar's court as he stood before Caesar. So you guys are following in the footsteps of a pretty significant minister, the Apostle Paul. Well, thank you for your time. We could go on and talk for a couple more hours. In fact, I said 20 minutes. We've almost gone twice that. See, you guys are big talkers with much to say, but I think really timely material. May the Lord bless you, keep you, turn his face towards you, grant you peace, and may your labors be unto the fulfillment of that prophecy from Habakkuk 2, which is the knowledge of the glory of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. Blessings, man. Godspeed to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.